Hello, hello, hello. Thank you very much for checking out the Help Create weekly live stream. My name is Chase. I am your host, and I will be coming to you live every Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern. We'll have different topics to discuss. We'll also have future interview guests. I've already booked one for July that I think will be really, really great. That's a reminder now that I actually need to send an invite to that person. But rest assured, my ADHD will be under control, and I'll make sure we have some great guests upcoming. Welcome to everybody who is coming on in. I'm seeing some what's up, Chase Russell. You almost spelled my name right, but there we go. Yo, what's up, goat? Nothing much. I will take goat. I don't even know if that's serious, but hello, folks. Hey, thank you for reposting the stream. Scientific Libertarian, share it out there. If you're watching on YouTube or on Facebook or on X, please make sure you share this so other folks can check it out and enjoy it. And in fact, I'm going to be doing that myself right now on my personal Facebook. I'm going to be going in and sharing it so I can show you how easy it is. You just go into your right into your Facebook and search Chase Oliver for president if that's what you're doing. But if you're already on, say YouTube or X, you can just repost this. So that's what I'm going to do right now on Facebook, is repost it. So all my friends who are not following my my main page can now follow that. What's up? Hello. Who's your most likely running mate when you run again? Mike. Well, Mike has decided he has joined the Republican Party, so probably not. If I run again, we'll see, though. It's always really up to the delegates who chooses those kinds of things. You guys, just some initial Q&A while we get things going. But what is the topic of today's live stream? Well, we got a few, but the first one I really wanted to bring up is misconceptions about libertarians. So that's going to be the first topic we discuss tonight, the first thing we really check out. And it's because I put it out there earlier this week on both Facebook and X, asking you, what do you think are the biggest misconceptions facing libertarians? What do you think are the biggest misunderstandings that non-libertarians have about libertarians? So let's check this out. So Facebook, I got 271 comments to wade through. And on X, I got 172 comments. So I'm taking probably the most common things that I've seen, really kind of putting them all into one thing. So if I didn't word this exactly the way you phrased it in a comment, doesn't mean I didn't see your comment. It just means I'm kind of lumping several together. Thank you very much for reposting this stream. By the way, we're going to show the comments here so you can see them streaming right along if you want. Thank you very much. Sup, hello, howdy to you. But yes, thank you, Jennifer, for reposting the stream. You can also do that so other folks can check this out. But libertarian misconceptions. What do the average folks think about we libertarians that maybe we need to check out a little bit more of and really understand so that we can better communicate ourselves to those folks who who aren't libertarian, or who maybe don't realize they're libertarian or have never heard of libertarians. Like let's break some of these misconceptions. Far and away, the most popular, and by most popular, most common answer I got in the comments was, we're just Democrats who like guns, Republicans who like to smoke weed. We're Democrats who like X, Y, or Z, or Republicans who like X, Y, or Z. That kind of clashes with their platform. And the truth is big L libertarians, members of the Libertarian Party, having a completely separate platform that is very distinct from the Democrats and the Republicans. Sure, there is some overlap, such as like Second Amendment issues with the Republicans, or perhaps decriminalizing drugs is a part of many Democrats' platforms. But we have our own separate and distinct platform as a party. So if you want to check that out, you can go to lp.org, see our platform for yourself, and see how very much different it is than Democrats or Republicans. But that is by and far, in a way, the biggest misconception that people commented on, is that we are just Democrats who do this or Republicans who do that. And I can tell you right now, as a former Democrat, as somebody who once identified with the Democratic Party, I no longer do so for a variety of reasons. And that is, and for those variety of reasons, I just can't ever identify as a member of the Democratic Party. And I think there's a lot of libertarians who can't identify with the Democrats or Republicans. There are some small L libertarians, which is why, by the way, if you see on the banner there at the bottom, This is misconceptions about libertarians, small l. So not all of these will be about the Libertarian Party specifically, but really about those who hold the libertarian political philosophy. Some of those people do exist in the Republican Party. I'm sure some exist in the Democratic Party too. They're just not a very loud. Neither of them really get a lot of respect within those respective political parties. And as far as the Democrats go, they're not a very loud contingent. I mean, I would say Thomas Massie doesn't get respect, but he does preach pretty loudly. So does Ron Paul, and others. They just don't get a lot of respect within their own political party, the GOP. But that's why I'm using small L libertarians here. But let's go through a few more that are part of the big L Libertarian Party that are misconceptions. That we are a wasted vote. That it's a wasted vote to vote Libertarian. If you're not voting Republican, you're not voting Democrat, you're just wasting your vote. And the truth is that couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, when you vote outside the two-party system, at the very least, you're signaling to the two major parties what direction they should be heading to earn those excess, independent or third-party votes for future elections. You can help steer those things through the power of your vote. You're just signaling your discontent with both parties altogether. I think that is a worthy thing to put out there. It's not a wasted vote. I wish we had more places with ranked choice voting. In fact, we're going to talk about a ranked choice vote a little later and how that worked out in the biggest city in America. That'll be just a sneak preview of what we're going to be talking about a little later on in the podcast, or live stream rather. And so there we go. We're the wasted vote. I just can't jive with that, because people should be willing to have their voice out there. In fact, I think really we need to have more ballot access, more people being able to speak their mind and have their party represented. We shouldn't just have two choices or even three or four. We should just have a bunch of choices on the ballot. And in the best world, we would have no parties at all, but that's just not the world we live in. So right now we do have to organize around those political parties. And I think Libertarians, Greens, Constitution, everyone else should have just as much a bite of the apple as anybody else. They'd prefer if we didn't vote at all, if not for them. That's true. And that just shows you how much they disrespect our voice and our vote, is that they would rather us sit home. If not voted was on the ballot, like being represented by all the people who don't vote, it would win nearly every election, because, about 40% of Americans don't vote in the presidential election. It would just destroy the numbers of the major party candidates even. So the truth is they want an apathetic voting population so they can continue to do what they do. At the very least, it shows we're willing to vote, just not willing to vote red or blue. Exactly. We need to have that discontent showing, both to signal to the Republicans and Democrats why we're pissed off, but also, if you just don't belong to either of those political tribes, your political tribe should be able to be represented at the ballot. I fully believe that. So wasted vote, I just can't jive with that. I think that's a misconception, I guess. Here is a misconception. The LP isn't serious. I can see why some people think that. I can see why some people think that sometimes, because sometimes the LP isn't very serious. I think right now we have leadership who is trying to rebuild out of a very deep hole led by previous leadership that wasn't serious about supporting the party. They were serious about supporting something. It just wasn't the Libertarian Party. And they certainly benefited from that, through connections and dollar bills and other things. So, allegedly. I have to throw that out there. Nothing's been convicted. Nobody's been convicted of anything. We just have a full and thorough audit and investigative committee that the Libertarian Party put forward. And I think that actually shows that we're serious, that when we see wrongdoing from previous leadership, we actually investigate it. We look into it. And if you read the most recent, we are extremely serious. Thank you, Scientific Libertarian. I think, I think we are a real serious party, especially because of the fact that we investigated our flawed leadership in the past election cycle. And we're holding them to account. I hope we hold them to account at next conventions if they try to run again, that we make sure that those same bad actors don't try to jump into positions of leadership and kind of steer the party into the ditch, as opposed to trying to build a road forward for the Libertarian Party to actually grow as its own separate political entity, its own separate political party from the Democrats and Republicans. Ryan Woodcraft, my man, locally elected Libertarian in El Paso out there for his school board, proving misconceptions wrong at the local level, one step at a time, doing the Lord's work. We appreciate when folks do that. When will Chase run for president one more time? I get this asked all the time. I don't know. We'll see. Partially, it's going to see how much more serious and how much more the infrastructure of the party grows over the next several years. I'm going to be a part of that, not just for me, but for whoever runs for president in the future years, because I believe we do have to have better leadership and better structural integrity in the party that's going to actually support its candidates for president and vice president, as well as all down the ballot, regardless of the race they're running, what position it is. So, yeah, there's that. So let's see. That's another misconception. The LP isn't serious. That the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire represents us. Without a doubt, let me just be completely frank here. The Libertarian Party of New Hampshire, their social media, the things they do not represent me. They don't represent most libertarians. I think if you asked everyone from Ron Paul, to me, to Joe Jorgensen, to Gary Johnson, to any of our candidates who are up and down the ballot the last 20 years, if the things that have come out of the LPNH social media really represent them, no, they would distance themselves from that, because a lot of the stuff they put out there is just reactionary trolling, edgelording for clicks and for people to be pissed at them. And so, no, I don't feel they represent me, and I don't feel they represent a serious wanting to build up the Libertarian Party. They actually want to side rail it. They encourage people to run as Republicans. They want to make the brand seem toxic, and I reject it. So that's all I'm going to say about that one. But yeah, that's a complete misconception. If you think the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire represents most libertarians, even in New Hampshire, no, I don't think that's the case. But across the country, certainly not the case at all. And I'm happy to reject them. Let's see. One misconception is that so many MAGA people claim to be libertarians. This is true. Some people in the MAGA sphere claim to be libertarians because I guess being MAGA is too toxic of a label to throw on themselves. And so they say, well, they'll throw a few words about limited government or cutting some spending and then claim themselves to be libertarian. Blake Masters is one that comes to mind. He was a very big MAGA candidate for Senate and tried to convince people that he was a libertarian-ish person, so much so that the Libertarian dropped out in that race. I would have argued against that. I was actually in that same election cycle running in Georgia. And I think my race made, ultimately, in the end, a lot more news for Libertarians than the guy who dropped out to endorse a Republican. I think me forcing the runoff in Georgia made a heck of a lot more noise. And so I encourage Libertarians to not drop out for people who just throw some talking points at you. Continue to run your race and represent the Libertarian Party. Let's see. Okay, so those are kind of the Libertarian Party specific ones. But let's get into, one more. We are the Open Borders Party. Philosophically, libertarians shouldn't believe in borders because we do believe in free people being able to move from place to place. Your own body, your labor is capital. It's money, the ability to produce things. And you shouldn't be hindered by a government if you're doing things peacefully, from interacting, living among people, renting from people, working for people, moving around peacefully. But libertarians recognize that this is the world we live in, that there are borders. And while philosophically we can argue for one thing, I philosophically can argue for one thing, but in the real world, when I'm running for office, I ran on the Ellis Island model that we should have some sort of basic vetting for people coming in and going out, but that we shouldn't hinder people, for any undue reason. And that as long as you're not like a seriously dangerous person, you should be able to come here and work. But we have to have some sort of process that streamlines that. Certainly not what we have now, right? So we're not. And I would argue most big L libertarian candidates are kind of there. So that is, the fact that we might philosophically argue in the libertarian philosophy, and that's, broadly speaking, outside of the party in open borders. That doesn't mean every candidate runs on full open borders. In fact, I think most candidates run on what I just said, the Ellis Island model, basic vetting, but not, this giant terroristic group called ICE that's part of DHS that shouldn't exist in the first place, and the entire abuse of due process and what we're seeing from the Trump administration. You can disagree with all of that, but also not be open borders. I think the idea that opposing what Trump is doing instantly makes you open borders, whether you're libertarian or not, is kind of a bullshit straw man. And the truth is that if you just believe in the rule of law, you should be opposing what Trump's doing because of the violations of due process and the way that goes. The libertarian position on immigration is extremely unpopular. Well, if the position which most candidates run on is the Ellis Island model, I would argue that that is actually what built this country up. And if you properly communicate that, if you just look at how much people respect things like the Statue of Liberty, Ellis Island, and all the story of people coming through the registry room and all that, and how many people's family actually comes through that heritage, it's an extremely popular position. I think we are strawmanned into being quote unquote open borders by people who want to excuse the actions of ICE, the actions of the Trump administration, the abuse of rule of law, of separation of powers, of disregarding judicial review, these kinds of things. And so I think it's a BS excuse that people use, to try to make our position seem unpopular and to try to straw man us into something that we're not. Some libertarians are full open borders, and they will always argue that even if they're a candidate. But most, even if you philosophically believe in open borders, recognize the country we live in, and that that's not going to fly with an electorate, and that you have to improve upon what you have. You can't always insist on perfection, that you do sometimes have to insist on improvements for the overall improvement of liberty. That is called being pragmatic. And some libertarians are scared of that word. Not a lot of them actually run for office, though. Most of the ones that do run for office understand the pragmatism of what you have to do if you were to win. Let's see some of the other ones. We all want anarchy. Not all libertarians are anarchists. I would argue most anarchists are libertarian in one way or another. But no, there's overlap, but it does not necessarily mean if you're a libertarian, you are an anarchist. I have libertarian anarchist friends who I love and respect and philosophically disagree with on the fact that whether government should exist at all. I'm a minarchist. I do believe a minimal government needs to exist in order to protect the liberty of all people. It's just, that's where I disagree with anarchists. But we have anarchist libertarians. We have non-anarchist libertarians. I would argue the non-anarchist libertarians are by far the larger group of the two, even though, again, it seems like a lot in popular culture, the anarchist libertarians, who I love and respect, get more of the airtime in mainstream media because it's easier to derail the overall picture if they pick the people who are, the furthest out from where the average person is. And I would argue the average person is not an anarchist because they either don't understand the philosophy or they disagree with it. I think both of those things are very valid. I understand the anarchist philosophy a lot more than most. I don't fully understand it because I'm not one, and I don't spend a lot of time reading anarchist literature, but I have hung out and had a lot of discussions with anarchists at libertarian gatherings, and I love and respect those who disagree with me. And you know what? I will work with them to chop down the size and scope of government up until we get to a point where I'm like, oh, whoa, we can't cut anymore. This is minarchy. And if we ever get to that point, we'll feel free to disagree and fight it out. But until then, they're under the libertarian umbrella, and they should be. Anybody who wants like the Constitution, just constitutionality to be respected by government, to be restrained that much or more, should be under the libertarian umbrella, because what the Democrats and Republicans do is certainly outside of those constitutional norms on a regular basis. And so if we want to build a big political movement as libertarians, we need to be really accepting a lot more people under the tent. We can't play the no true Scotsman libertarian. That's actually another misconception, is that there is no real libertarian, because every libertarian will say so-and-so isn't a real libertarian. That's a great joke. It's kind of an inside joke, but no, there are true libertarian streams of thought, and there's a big tent there. Moderates never get any airtime because it doesn't generate interest or revenue for news stations. Yeah, sex sells, violence sells, extremism sells. This is also true of the average Democrat and Republican. This is why I feel like their parties are getting further and further hyper-partisan and pulled apart, because it is attractive to mainstream media to really paint their opponent, whether it's MSNBC painting Republicans or Fox News painting Democrats, as the most extreme versions of themselves. And this is actually pushing them further and further apart, which is leaving a great big middle lane for people who just want to be left the F alone. And I think that's libertarians. I think that's where libertarians need to be. So it's like the WWE. If only someone ran for president on the idea that the two-party system is kayfabe, and like the WWE. If only we had had a candidate in 2024 running on that message. We'll never know, I guess. We'll never know. Manufactured beef. Oh, yeah. It's certainly manufactured a lot of the time. I always say I want a government that fits within the Constitution. Heck yeah, Lori. And I certainly think if someone like Lori were to be running for office, that'd be someone you want to support. I'm just going to say, just saying that out there. Lori Shillings, keep doing your thing. So that we're all anarchists. That's a misconception. Let's see. I think this is a big one. And I think these two go together actually. That we are only against things and that we're not for things, and that we don't care about the vulnerable, we lack empathy, or as my friend Thomas Squeeder, people say libertarians want the poor and disabled to die. In fact, I've had people tell me that I want the poor and disabled to die, even though I myself am poor and disabled. Shout out to Thomas Squeeder. Um, uh, yeah, I think this is a huge misconception. First off, I think one of the reasons why we are seen to be only against things is because government does a whole lot of messed up things that we call out and we say are violations of liberty. And we regularly do this on a regular basis. I may actually be running for office in the great state of Indiana in 2026. Hoosiers, you might want to check that out. Lori Shillings, just keep that name on the top of your head if you're watching. Now, that being said, yeah, the fact that we lack empathy, that we aren't for things, the reason why we speak out against so many things is because the government does so many terrible things. When they do the occasional thing that is good, we can call that out and support it. Things like ending certificate of need in states across the country that will help make healthcare less expensive. Absolutely great thing to do. And this kind of leads into we don't care about the vulnerable, we lack empathy, and we want the poor and disabled to die. Those things just are not true. Just because we don't want the government to run giant welfare programs that are inefficient, that leak like, a bucket just with holes in it, just in terms of where that money goes, in terms of waste and just fraud, abuse, and grift, because that's how government works. Just because we think that mutualism and voluntarism and direct and mutual aid and charity are better ways to help our fellow man than big government programs, just because we care for people enough to say we'll invest ourselves instead of insisting that the government solve the problem for us, right? That doesn't mean we lack empathy. It means we actually think that there are better ways to serve the needs of those who are in need. And I think if you just look at how a lot of nonprofits and charities use the funds they get versus how much we spend on a giant welfare system that, overall it just has so much waste and fraud and abuse in it that we're just really not getting the best bang for our buck. Just because we don't want it to be done through taxation and forcing us to have to be entering these giant welfare programs doesn't mean we don't care for people who need help. It just means we think there are better ways to help people. And I do think this is something that we need to get across better as libertarians. We do need to put our heart on our sleeves. This is another misconception, is that we don't communicate through emotion. We only communicate through logic and philosophy, and we don't talk about what real world people are going through. And I think that's something we as libertarians, both within the party and without, outside of the party, need to get better at communicating, is that we do care for people, but that many times government is not the best way to help people. And many times, as Building Fins Up says, governments right now literally stop people from helping others without them. I've seen this. I have seen people who want to help feed the homeless in places like Columbia, South Carolina, and they're prevented because government says you need to pay for a bunch of expensive permitting, or and I've seen other food organizations that are prevented literally by having police and others pour bleach on the food that they wanted to serve people because they don't have food inspections and things like this. And let me tell you right now, if you're somebody who has not eaten for days, starving for a meal, and you see the government pouring bleach on food that is by all means probably perfectly good to eat, made with love by somebody who wants to help their fellow man, that's just an insult. And that lacks empathy. That lacks love and care. That lacks moral values. And so I think libertarians really need to get over this misconception, most of all, that we don't care about people or that we don't care about the working class. I am working class. I don't have a college degree. I'm somebody who's always worked in the service industries, whether that's working in restaurants. I've worked in offices the last few years, but most of my life, I worked in like restaurants and in kitchens and in back rooms and doing catering and doing the real hard work that millions of Americans do across this country and don't get paid a lot of money to do, you know, compared to many others. And so I empathize with those folks. And the fact is that, just like my friend Tom Queter, who is himself poor and disabled, the fact that people say that I want poor people to die is ridiculous because I myself am not a rich man. I'm probably the least rich person to run for president in a long time. I'd have to look it up, you know. I'm probably the most working class person who's run for president in any party for a long time. Um, that I can think of. Certainly out of the Democrats, Republicans, and Libertarians, and I'll throw the Green Party in there too. So for me, I just think that's ridiculous. And the fact that we have solutions outside of government to help people in need doesn't mean we don't care for people. It just means we think the government does a really bad job of it, and we want and we want people to have better options outside of government. Progressives believe libertarians don't care about people having health care because we're against single payer. That's another one. I want people to have health care. Single payer is not the best way to do it. Single payer is the way you get rationing, you get reduced care, you get bad care for really things like cancer and other things. If you just look at, the fact that people in the UK and other socialist countries who have socialized healthcare die of cancers that a lot of folks here can get, if they have good health insurance, can detect early on. That doesn't mean that socialized healthcare is a solution. It means we need to improve upon solutions here within the free market. Things like direct primary care, which reduce the cost of nearly, like 90% of what you get through healthcare, and you pair that with catastrophic insurance coverage. You allow people to buy health insurance across state lines. You allow for the purchase of drugs across international boundaries. You remove patent evergreening, so it's less expensive and more quick to bring generics online. You support things like compounding pharmacies who can make pharmaceuticals for a fraction of the price and offer it to people at a much reduced rate, especially those who don't have insurance, as opposed to name brand drugs. You allow for the removal of restrictions at the FDA on R&D so that we can streamline the approval of drugs through safety, not efficacy necessarily. Efficacy can be done through the free market. Safety, if anything, is what the FDA should be doing. Really, you can argue to get rid of the FDA and do it all through the free market. But if you're going to have the FDA do anything, just do safety, not efficacy. Efficacy can be tested elsewhere. You just want to make sure people aren't going to drop dead. And again, that's that pragmatic move. Well, I argue you don't need an FDA at all. A lot of libertarians would just like to move in the direction of reducing what the FDA does and putting that into the realm of private testing. Government ruins almost everything it touches. Yeah, there's a lot of things that government ruins. This is why I'm a minarchist. I believe in the minimal role of government as much as possible. Because once you get outside of that minimal framework, it's just layers upon layers of bureaucracy and BS. So let's see, a few more. That we are all pro-choice or pro-life. I have known libertarians to be both. I think the majority of libertarians are pro-choice, particularly within the Libertarian Party. When you get outside of the party, you find a lot of like small libertarians in the Republican Party who are more pro-life, anti-abortion, whatever you want to say. Use your choice of your own terms there, but that's not a 100% thing. Age of, I am certainly pro-choice though. I'll just put that out there. Age of consent, that we don't believe in the age of consent. This is a thing that always gets thrown out to libertarians. Could not be further from the truth. If you ask the average libertarian, they're like, that's disgusting, wood chipper for those kinds of people, that kind of a thing. I am somebody who believes that, we have kind of start this age of 18 to be the age to vote, the age to be drafted, the age to do this, the age to do that. That's the age of legal adulthood. That should be the age at which all things are considered consenting into a contract. Absent that, most things like healthcare or the things you need a parent to really be helping to consent and provide advice and consent in that relationship. But for things like sex, absolutely not. That should be something left to adults. Kids are going to be stupid, do stupid things. But that doesn't certainly mean that adults should be encouraged in that behavior, or that we should encourage weird ass people to be weird ass people. Nope. Let's just dispel that one altogether. Throw that one out there. Libertarians want kids to be kids and adults to be adults, and let's not mix those two things up. So there we go. Um, we have no platform beyond taxes. This is one that goes back to Libertarian Party again. If you want to see the Libertarian Party platform, it goes well beyond just taxes. Go to lp.org and check that out. There's a whole bunch there that dispels many of the misconceptions that people might have about libertarians, particularly Libertarian Party. If you read, go to lp.org and check that out. Age of consent should include that the government can't track or tax you. Hey, how many people would hate taxes if they weren't taxed for their summer job when they were teenagers, and then all of a sudden when they hit 18, they had to pay the government toll? I think we'd be seeing a lot of people want to cut taxes. That was the case. But yeah, certainly tracking. Keep the government out of your kids' private data if they are just like they're living their lives. Another straw man, they don't care about kids having a good education because we support a school voucher system or removing government from education altogether. That's another one. We don't care about the vulnerable. We don't want to help educate people. We just think that the public education system sucks in many cases, and that leaves many cracks for people to fall through. And that the way to fill in those cracks is to have a more broad-based, market-based education system where parents and students have more control than bureaucrats over the kind of education they can choose for their kids. Certainly a better thing. Let me just go through my list. We would allow corporations to run amok. That's another. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing, Terry. That's another misconception, that we would allow corporations to just run amok and just control everything. The truth is libertarians don't believe in things like too big to fail. We wouldn't be, in the housing crisis of 2008 and 2009, we wouldn't have been bailing out these big banks. We would have allowed them to fail, break apart, be liquidated into the marketplace, to be reallocated in the marketplace with more responsible actors, and you'd have more than just a few big banks controlling things, because they would have been broken up through the nature of the free market. And so I think it's Democrats and Republicans who do far more of backing major corporations through subsidies and bailouts and tax breaks than libertarians, who just want to say, hey, let the free market do what the free market does, and not let the government get in the way when bad actors screw themselves and fail. Those things should be failing, because that's the way the market should work. Those resources should be reallocated to other people who are going to be a heck of a lot better at doing that than government bureaucrats. So no, we don't want corporations to run amok. We actually don't believe in bailing them out. We don't believe in too big to fail. The other thing we don't believe in is tort caps. I think if you pollute a community and a citizen jury says you're poisoning us, you should be able to bankrupt those guys in court. Why? Because that's going to provide a much better incentive than the slaps on the wrist that government gives, because they're bought and paid for by big energy companies. So what you really want is to be able to bankrupt these people through civil actions. And you do that by removing tort caps and allowing individuals who are done wrong, whose property or whose life is done wrong, or communities as a class action, to sue people who harm them and make them pay through the teeth. That's the way you're going to hold giant corporations accountable, not through a giant bureaucratic system that is gamed for them. Like, who really controls the Democrats and Republicans? Do you think it's the average little guy? Or do you think it's the big corporations that are screwing people? Do you think that that's really the game that's going on? I do. Whether it's the Democrats or the Republicans, they both have giant special interests that buy and pay for them. They trade them around like it's fantasy football. And you're right. It's like the WWE. It's like kayfabe. That's what somebody said earlier. It's like the WWE. Exactly. That's what it is. Government creates big corporations. No business would be so massive without government giving advantages. Exactly. You'd see a lot more competition if we stopped cutting the legs out from new entrepreneurs, new emerging businesses. We really make it easier for these giant corporations to function through subsidies and tax breaks and all these things that the average person, the average new business doesn't have. And so it's harder for them to grow and compete with these giant corporate interests. And if we remove so much of these layers of government bureaucracy, we would have the option, if we removed all this bureaucracy and all this stuff, to see a more competitive market, a real free market. And we would see small and medium businesses actually competing with big businesses. We would see big businesses fail, break up, and be reallocated, and it would function a lot better. But the government gets in the way. So no, we don't want corporations to run amok. We want the market to run as it should, without the giant visible hand of the government getting in the way and gaming the system for giant corporations. I think that is the last of the major list that I had written down. I want to say thank you so much to everyone who commented on that. we're going to be putting out future posts, both on social media, but as well as Patreon exclusive posts. So if you do join the Patreon, which I'm going to throw the Patreon in the comments right now for folks to check out. This is going out. If you want to go to the Patreon right there, you can check it out and join if you choose to support. We're going to have future Patreon exclusive polls and questions to ask that will help guide future live streams, but we'll also still put stuff out on regular social media as well. So if you just want to like and subscribe, you can do that as well. But check it out. Check out the Patreon, you guys, if you want to. I do have a couple of more things I want to talk about, but that is misconceptions about libertarians. I have some thoughts on the Israel-Iran war and U.S. involvement. What we saw today was the Trump administration at the NATO summit. We heard from Pete Hegseth, Marco Rubio, and Donald Trump about this issue. It seems that there is a fragile ceasefire holding. I do hope that ceasefire holds. I'm a bit pessimistic about how long that's going to hold, given what's already happened. And I really want to reiterate that I am somebody who believes in non-intervention from the part of the United States. I think we need to get out of this. We should not have done the airstrikes that we did. I disagree with them. I disagree with Trump's assessment that everything is completely demolished, obliterated, whatever the word he was using. I do think that there was probably an effect on Iran and whatever they might have been doing, but they could have been moving their nuclear program. They kind of expected this was going to happen. We don't really know how degraded things are. We don't know how far along they were. Let's be honest. There's a bit of a boy who cried wolf when it comes to Iran and nuclear weapons, particularly when it comes from Bibi Netanyahu and the government of Israel. They have been saying that they're just a few months away. They're just a few months away. They're just a few months away. We've been hearing that for decades. And so it's really hard to know exactly what intelligence on the ground is real and what is being manipulated to tell a story. And I think this is a repeat of what we saw in the lead up to Iraq, and it really worries me that we seem to be seeing some of the same mistakes being made, cherry picking intelligence, these kinds of things that could really lead us into furthering and escalating this. Again, I'm praying that we see a ceasefire here. I'm praying we see a ceasefire in all conflicts around the world. Let's be honest. But if Iran is not directly threatening the United States, what is the point of bombing Iran? Exactly. There's no direct threat. By the way, if the idea is we can't have nuclear weapons in the Middle East, who has nuclear weapons in the Middle East? The same people who are claiming that Iran can't have them. So if nuclear weapons in the Middle East are just an existential threat and a danger, there's other people that need to denuclearize in the area. I'm just saying, if that's your argument, right? And the argument that Iran's making is, well, if nuclear weapons are keeping some people safe in the Middle East, if we have them, we'll be safe. And what we should be doing is disengaging warfare around the world so that people don't feel the need to have to proliferate nuclear weapons. And so we can encourage non-proliferation and ultimately nuclear arms reduction around the world. That's what I would like to see. Ultimately, we're not going to get that if we further this posturing of aggression and bombing people as opposed to diplomacy. I think Donald Trump, honestly, was very divided because he is somebody who's kind of an empty vessel. It kind of fills with whoever whispers in his ear at any given time. I said the same when I debated Art Laffer last year at the Soho Forum, that, just because you might be whispering good ideas into his ear about the economy doesn't mean most people are. And that's kind of what happened is he kind of at first was saying, no, we're going to wait. We're going to see how diplomacy goes. And then he got convinced by, I think, Marco Rubio, and maybe, kind of the more war hawky people in his cabinet, as well as Bibi Netanyahu, that there was some sort of existential threat that we had to go right now. And, I think he kind of got pulled in the wrong direction. I'm hoping he's being pulled down in the direction of diplomacy. I would like to see us moving into an area of disengagement, certainly in all areas of foreign entanglements with the military. Let's close all of those foreign bases. Let's really bring the United States military back home to do what it's supposed to be doing, which is protecting the homeland. Most of this war is entirely built on fear. Exactly. Fear of Iran, Iran's fear of Israel. Ultimately, I think it's sad for really the innocent people in both cases whose governments are not representing them well and throwing missiles at one another. That's who I really pray for all the time, is the innocent people in all this. And so I'm I'm thankful to see this kind of very, very, very fragile ceasefire holding for now. Again, this is being recorded on the 25th of June. It could entirely change if you are watching this in the future. We could have a full-on war. You never know. And I think the actions of the United States over the past week made that a more likely occurrence. And that worries me. And so pray for the innocent people whose governments are not representing them well. And that includes the United States and the warfare machine that is unfortunately, having the full authority of the United States behind it right now, as well as the governments of Israel and Iran. Pray for the innocent people who live under them, who don't want to see missiles flying at each other. They better not have another draft. I tell you that. I got nephews and nieces, and they're of draft age or soon to be, and that really does worry me. I used to be worried about me being drafted back in the Iraq war days. Now I have to worry about that, and that really does. Thank you for reposting the stream, Michael. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We don't got much more to talk about yet. Let me just flip through. Yeah, I still handwrite all my notes. I'm very analog in a digital world. Trump at NATO. I will say he took a question from a journalist from Ukraine, and he did seem to be a little bit more sympathetic to Ukraine. It seems to me that as he is increasing military action in the Middle East, stepping away from those promises, he's also stepping away from his promises to disengage in Ukraine as well. I'm wondering if the war hawks are kind of really getting in his ear a lot more and saying, your legacy as a hero will be remembered as you'll be a peacemaker, you'll be greeted as a liberator, XYZ, if you engage both in Ukraine and in the Middle East and elsewhere. That's what I do worry about, is that the United States continuing to build up military arms around the world. Where is this heading? I worry it's not heading for war. I hope it stays peaceful, but that's where we're at. Next thing to talk about. Zoran Mamdani wins big in New York City. New York City just had a mayoral primary for the Democratic Party. The two leading candidates were Mamdani and former Governor Andrew Cuomo. And they do a ranked choice vote out there in New York City. Shout out to ranked choice voting. I think it provides more options for people. I'm going to talk about how that had an impact in just a little bit. And right now, while the totals are not completed, they'll finish that tabulation next Tuesday and be announced who won ultimately over 50% of the vote with the ranked choice. Mamdani was leading so well by the end of the night that Cuomo did concede and recognize that he's not going to win in the second round. What message does this send? Now, he is a self-declared democratic socialist in the vein of a Bernie Sanders or an AOC, those kinds of folks. He talks about a lot of things, of government taking over things. I oppose state socialism. So let's just say policy-wise, not a lot of things we're going to agree on. The one thing I do agree with him on is he talks about permitting for things like food carts and other things, and how expensive it is for small business owners to get started. So there's one thing I'll say I agree with him on, but most everything else I'm probably going to disagree with him on, because he believes government intervention everywhere else, I guess, other than food carts. He believes in government-owned grocery stores and no fare buses and other things that we'll see how it goes. I don't anticipate a lot of success but we'll see. It's the largest city in America. If he ends up winning in the fall, we'll see how his mayorship goes. Right now, he'll be running against Eric Adams and Curtis Silva, the Republican, just lamb to the slaughter, because Republicans never get taken seriously in the city of New York. But we'll see how this goes. It'll be a three-way race. It'll be kind of interesting to see. But what's the message from the voters here? I think the biggest message is honestly a rejection of Andrew Cuomo. Cuomo was a terrible choice for the establishment Democrats to put forward. And I think this should be a message for the kind of the establishment wing. Hate to give you free advice to Democrats, but for those of you who are looking at what the establishment wing should be running, folks like Andrew Cuomo is not it. They will lose to new faces right now. Democrats are not wanting these same old stale kind of candidates, the Nancy Pelosi's and Chuck Schumer's of the world. So if you're that non-democratic socialist, the more kind of generalized liberal left of center Democrat, you need to find better communicators, because Andrew Cuomo was a terrible choice, right? He was just an awful choice. Not only is he scandal-ridden and forced out of office, and many of these same establishment liberals in the Democratic Party who backed him against Mamdani pushed him out of office just a few years ago for a sex abuse scandal, right? In addition to the COVID scandal of the fact that he put elderly people back into nursing homes and spread COVID so much in the state of New York, was killing thousands of people because of irresponsible actions by throwing COVID patients into the nursing homes. Like, right? Like, how many people lost their grandparents or their great grandparents because of this? And so we'll see. I think that's the biggest message, is that Cuomo is being rejected. Now, I do also think we need to remember that this is a Democratic primary in the city of New York, and that is a close primary, and only, like, what is it, a few 100,000 people in a city of tens of millions voted. And so it will be interesting in the fall to see how Mamdani tries to, maybe, if he moderates his message. We'll see. We'll see how it translates. How would Democrats learn and capitalize from this? Honestly, whatever spectrum of the party you're on, if you were a Democrat, and again, I hate to give Democrats free advice, but the lesson they should learn from this, if they're not stupid, which, let's be real, many Democrats are just frankly stupid in terms of their politics. It's how they can lose to someone like Donald Trump. It's how they nominate people like Kamala Harris, right? Like, if you think Kamala Harris is going to be the success in 2028, that's the equivalent of putting Andrew Cuomo up in this primary. You would be stupid to do so. And you would lose to somebody in the primary like an AOC type. So those more establishment Democrats, learn that lesson. Put better communicators who are not stale, old-ass people. But really, this leads to policy versus personality. Because I think while New York is a very blue city, I do think most people are not quite as to the left as Mamdani is. And I think if he does win the mayorship, he's going to have many challenges enacting the policies he wants, because he's going to have a lot of pushback, both in the elected folks as well as the average public in New York City, who are a lot, I just don't see them being quite as far left as he is. But I think his personality helped him win that primary. The fact that he communicated very well, the fact that he was younger, an attractive voice who could walk around and just talk to regular people, where if you look at Andrew Cuomo, oh my God, like, just what a awkward communicator, right? And so I think a lot of this is really personality more so than policy. And I think people from across the political spectrum, outside of even the Democratic Party, Libertarians, Republicans, Independents, can learn from this win in a primary that you don't have to be a giant money-connected, big business guy to win your primary or to get your message across. In fact, it's a lot better to seem just as an authentic human being. Even if I disagree with so much of what Mamdani supports, I can tell you he seems a hell of a lot more authentic as a human being than Andrew Cuomo, who just comes off as just this weird political elitist who, frankly, in his race, didn't even seem like he wanted to win it. Didn't even seem like he wanted to be a part of it. And that lack of enthusiasm played through to the voters, too. The Democrats need an Obama-like master rhetorician. I would say orator, but I like rhetorician. I've never heard that word. New word today. This does not speak to the quality of Obama's policies, by the way. Of course, Obama in practice versus the things he says and the way he says them are a lot different. But yeah, he has a lot more style and than substance there. But you're right. Again, that's personality versus policy. I think anybody would benefit from having somebody who kind of communicates the way Obama did back in the day to the average voter, even if his policies are terrible and they suck and they pushed me out of the Democratic Party. It's the fact that the way he communicated, the way he gets through. And that's why we have to emotionally connect with people. We have to have that empathy. We have to wear our heart on our sleeves, Libertarians. We can't just come at them with philosophy. We have to come at them as to why we care about them and why we're running for office matters to us, but should matter to them because we care about them. And that needs to come across better, Libertarians. And I think that's what won Mamdani the race, frankly, because Cuomo just could not pull that off. Looked terrible doing it. And so throw your thoughts, in the comments. Feel free to hello from Mississippi. Hello from Georgia. I am in the extreme minority that wants logic and facts to dominate in politics instead of emotions. You are in the extreme minority there, Connor. Correct. And I think it's something we Libertarians need to get better at communicating. Hearts would not function very well on one's sleeves. Well, thank you for the very little interpretation, scientific libertarian. As always, you gave us the very scientific explanation. No, my heart would not function well outside of my chest cavity and on my sleeve. But rest assured, rhetorically, we need to wear our hearts on our sleeves. I'd say, sadly, most people vote based on their feelings. It's a fact of life, and we need to be better at communicating emotionally the message of liberty. I will say that. Lastly, this is a little bit of pop culture news, you guys. It's Pride Month. It is Pride Month indeed. You see that rainbow Gadsden flag behind me? It is Pride Month, and it is the 20th anniversary of a film that I think, and it's being re-released in theaters right now. I'm seeing it going viral on TikTok with a lot of Gen Zers who are watching it for the first time, and that's Brokeback Mountain. Brokeback Mountain is celebrating its 20th anniversary in theaters, and I wanted to talk a little bit about this film, how things have changed in 20 years, and really the impact that I think this film had. First off, it is a superb movie. If you have not seen it, please go out and see it. I know people who have. I'll throw out this. Thomas Queter will be on Freedom Uncut's game show on Friday at 8 p.m. Check it out. But back to the entertainment news here. This movie came out 20 years ago and had a huge cultural impact at the time. And I think a lot of people who are younger have not seen it. And I would encourage Gen Z audiences to, check out this movie. It is a film about two men whose love could not be openly expressed and the torture that provides to them throughout their lives. It's a very sad film, let's be real, but very impactful. And it really, 20 years ago, helped reinforce the fact that I will never, ever hide who I am, and that I'm going to be, and that I'm going to be authentically me, no matter the consequences, because I want to have love in my life. And I don't want to have to, as the character of Ennis Del Mar does by the end of the film, spoiler alert, really, really regret what could have been in his life had he been braver to embrace his love with Jack. And it's a really impactful film. And I think also there's some things that I think Ang Lee did a superb job of directing the film, of taking this short story, which it's adapted from, and really fleshing it out in a way that communicates to audiences that are not LGBTQ what so many people had gone through throughout, especially in rural America in that time period. This is, set in the mid 20th century, and it is a powerful film. And this weekend, we are celebrating Stonewall and Pride Weekend. I will actually be doing the LP Alliance podcast this Saturday, their live stream all about Stonewall. So do check that out. If you know the LP Alliance, I'll make sure to share it on my social media as well. But just shout out to those who created this film, the actors, the actresses, the cinematographers, the writers, the director, everybody who was involved in this film. Thank you for making a very powerful film that tells a story in a way that so many of my straight friends really connected with. And, and to the bravery of the actors who at the time playing gay was a very risky move for straight actors. Jake Gyllenhaal, rest in peace, Heath Ledger, but also Michelle Williams and Anne Hathaway do a fantastic job in that film. There's so many great performances that just feel so authentic. And I'll give you my memory of seeing this movie 20 years ago. I had a boyfriend at the time, and we went to go see the Atlanta premiere of the film. And we were in a room full of gay couples. And when I tell you that by the end of that film, there was not a dry eye in the house. And it was kind of a cathartic thing. Now, I took some of my straight friends to it a few weeks later, and we made the mistake of maybe having a few drinks before the show. They weren't really in the mindset to get it, but later they watched it when I had it on DVD, gave it a second chance, and really found the connection to it. But I just really think that if you have not seen the movie Brokeback Mountain, I've never watched it. Now I will need to. It is a great film. You will see why it was Oscar nominated for so many things. And honestly, I think while I love the Joker's, Heath Ledger's performance as the Joker in The Dark Knight, um, I think this is his best performance, bar none. I think Jake Gyllenhaal has a large library as well, but I could say it's one of his top performances as well. And shout out to the women again, Michelle Williams and Anne Hathaway. They both do a great job. They have a limited amount of screen time, and they just do everything they can with it in terms of, especially Anne Hathaway. I really love. But yeah, so a friend of mine was a young adult when he went to Stonewall. It was a game changer. First time he saw men dance together. And that's why it's important. And I'm going to talk about that this weekend in that live stream. But today, just my pop culture recommendation is walk into this movie with an open mind. It's 20 years old. So if you've never seen it, go out and check it out. Even those of you who are straight and cisgender, check it out. Spread your mind out a little bit. But that's it for this week. I'm going to kind of wrap it up here. Again, check out the Patreon. I'm going to comment the Patreon again if you want to check it out. I just shared that link out there. I believe that's the link we need to get to the Patreon. Check it out and keep tuning in every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. I will be doing these live streams each week. They will not always be just me. So if you're like, oh my God, I'm so sick of Chase, can we hear from somebody else? Yes, we're going to have other people coming on to talk. In fact, I have booked a great guest for July. We'll have a few more coming up later on in the month. Love, Simon is actually my wife's favorite. We haven't actually seen Brokeback Mountain though. Love, Simon's a great movie, cute movie, but Brokeback Mountain is a definite, I would say, upgrade in terms of like it's, but Love, Simon is a really cute film. It really is. Kudos, Chase. Keep it going. Thank you very much, Jeremy. The show Heartstopper is pretty damn good. Oh my God. Let me just say that show. Oh, that show is like how I wish my high school life had been. Oh, it is so like for young people. I think that show is a game changer. Like, there was nothing like that. When I was young, like we had things like Queer as Folk, very adult oriented shows. This Heartstopper is a show that is perfectly age appropriate for young adults, for gay young adults. I think it is great show. It's so, oh my God, my friends' kids love that show. I watched a few episodes. I'm like, oh my God, this is like, I wish there was young adult content like that when I was, in my late teens, early 20s. Never tire of you, Chase. We wanted 4 years of you, remember. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Well, we'll get me every week coming to you Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern. So check it out each week. Support the podcast, support the live stream rather, and other projects that I'm doing via the Patreon. I would welcome your support. We're going to be doing some writing projects as well as some visual art projects coming up. So stay tuned for those. And the more folks who join as patrons, the more folks, or the more quickly we can get those projects off the ground. Also, next week, we're going to start shouting out those patrons. So if you are a patron who's watching this today going, oh my God, Chase didn't shout me out today, rest assured, I have an entire list of names next week to shout out and thank so much for supporting this live stream and the projects that we're doing over at Help Create. This has been the Help Create live stream weekly coming to you. My name is Chase Oliver. I was the 2024 Libertarian candidate for president, and now I'm just somebody who likes to talk about freedom, pop culture, politics, everything in between, and also interview those who are making a positive difference in the world or creating amazing pieces of art that they can share with us. So if you know somebody like that, make sure you DM me. And eventually we're going to have an email account set up, a Discord set up where you can share those who are doing great work that we can highlight in the future. Make sure that guests can contact us and book with us, and we'll be booking in independent guests as well. But thank you so much. I haven't regretted voting for Chase even for 1 millisecond. Me neither. I haven't regretted voting for me either. Nice job. Enjoyed it, Chase. Great show, Chase. Thank you. Love hearing from you. Same here. Well, you guys have a good night. I'll say the same thing I say to everybody. Peace, love, and liberty to you and all the people you know. And have a great night. Goodbye.